Okay, well, we're a couple minutes past the top of the hour and we've got a number of participants joining us. So why don't we get started? And I'd like to welcome all of you to CWR Academy and this webinar, Pitching the Story of Women Religious, which is really a continuation of our 2021 conference that we keep going with it. My name is Robert Cogswell, and I'm the Director of Communications for the Sisters of St. Joseph of Orange. And I'm also a member of the CWR board and the amazing education committee. So oftentimes we will start with a brief prayer at this moment, but we're going to skip those because we wouldn't do that at conference with all the workshops that we're doing. So we're going to get right into some webinar operations here and just let you know, you're seeing a lot of faces right now because we have a pretty large panel today with Gail DeGeorge and the team at Global Sisters Report. And you'll get to meet all of them and ask questions. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the time here. You can use the chat feature or the Q&A feature, and we'll be keeping an eye on those. And if we don't get to all of your questions, you're always welcome to reach out to our panelists afterwards. We're also recording this session, as we do for most webinars. It's really just flash conversations that we don't record, but everything else gets recorded and will land on the CWR website afterwards. So without further ado, we're already moving along pretty quickly here. And I'd like to introduce Gail DeGeorge, who is the editor for Global Sisters Report. And as she tells you, this is one of the best jobs in journalism because it brings her experience in international reporting together with a passion for storytelling and her Catholic faith. She's had a career as a reporter or editor focusing on economic, business, and labor market issues for global media companies. So that's like Bloomberg News and other regional publications, such as the Miami Herald and South Florida Sun Sentinel. But she's also taught 8th grade and confirmation classes and spent a lot of years in her parishes serving there. So without further ado, please welcome Gail DeGeorge.
Great. Thanks, Rob, for that introduction. And I wanted to thank the Communicators for Women Religious and all of you for taking time for us to present this workshop to you. This actually came out of a discussion that I had with Jeannie Heiser a few months ago, in which I had said that, frankly, I was kind of surprised that we don't get more pitches, frankly, and more information from women religious congregations. So I expressed this to her, and she invited us to go ahead and do a workshop of explaining to you who we are and how easy it is really to interest us in getting stories about the sisters told in various venues as we can. So I hope that this session, will help you in pitching story ideas for Global Sisters Report and other media, and then will help us in fulfilling our mission to report on and give voice to women religious around the world. So I wanted to share just a few slides about Global Sisters Report. I think that, Brian, we are able to share now. So assume that that's the case. As I mentioned, we've launched in April 2014 as a separate website publication on National Catholic Reporter. We have attracted more than 4 million visitors since our launch. We have readers in 193 plus countries and territories around the world, about 90,000 average monthly readers, 33,000 plus email subscribers, and about 330 sister columnists from around the world. And Sister Michelle Moore will tell us more about columnists in a little bit. So we have a network of freelancers in the US and around the world. We're always looking to continue to build and enhance that network. And we, as I explain often, we as journalists write about Catholic sisters and their ministries, and then we also have the sisters write for us, and that is one of our great strengths. One of the things that we do, we get picked up. One of the things that should encourage you to get your stories told in Global Sisters Report is that when you tell the story to us, you're telling it often to other media as well. Some of you have picked up our stories for your own internal publications, but Catholic News Service also picks us up, as do a number of other publications. So in fact, I just got a query this morning from Julie Asher at Catholic News Service on another story they want to pick up from us. So that's also one of our strengths. We launched, as Robin mentioned, I had taught confirmation and 8th grade classes for many years. And I was really enthusiastic about getting these stories told to young Catholics. And so shortly into my tenure, we started looking into, and then we were able to launch a pilot project called GSR in the Classroom. And we have a number of lessons on our website. If you're not aware of this, feel free, please make it known to your those sisters who are still in education ministries that this is available free on the website with instructions and enhancements. And it's a wonderful resource. We have actually a segment about Advent, as well as a number of mission and ministries, racism, migration, human trafficking, that type of thing. So a number of the stories of the issues that sisters are working on, and hopefully in 2022, we'll be adding to that feature. So we, as mentioned, we are in our main website, we launched just this past year or so, year and a half, 2 new features I wanted to talk with you about a bit. One is community news, and that is a venue for you to be able to get your own information out there, whether it be about events, jubilees, new leadership teams, other events and opportunities, things that you want to share with the broader sisterhood. Please, fill out a community news form. We often do then look at those and pick out some of them for the other feature I wanted to mention, Monday Starter, which is a venue for us to have shorter items about sisters and congregations. We didn't seem to have a spot for things that maybe didn't require a full feature story, but we wanted to make note of in some way. So Monday Starter is a great way to have, again, get information out there. We don't publish everything that's in community news, of course, but as I mentioned, we do look at it, and we sometimes will elevate those items. So before, again, we'll keep this up for a bit, and then we can send this information out. But before I got into too many details about how to pitch to us and other information, I wanted to turn to the Global Sisters Report staff and have them introduce themselves. Before I start, there's 2 staff members who cannot join us. Sister Joyce Meyer deserves particular note. She is a sister of the Presentation of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and she was instrumental in starting Global Sisters Report and getting the groundwork laid with us and some of the financing in place with the Conrad and Hilton Foundation, which is our primary funder. So I wanted to note that Sister Joyce, again, has this fundamental role in really expanding our international columnists and getting us in touch with and in contact with international congregations. And then Stephanie Summers, who edits a lot of our international content, could not be here today, but also, again, she's been with us since 2014 and does a remarkable job editing content out of India, Vietnam, and elsewhere. So I wanted to give due note to Stephanie. And I'm going to start the introductions with someone who you'll be seeing as Gail DeGeorge. It's actually Doreen Ajiambo, who is our writer or correspondent in Kenya and for Africa. So Doreen, you want to introduce yourself? And then we'll go from there.
Hi, everybody. I'm Doreen Ajiambo. As Gail said, it's written Gail DeGeorge, but she's the one. I'm the regional correspondent for Global Sisters Report.
Okay. Chris?
I'm Chris Herlinger. I'm based in New York. I've been with GSR in some form since the beginning. I was a freelancer and was freelancing and then came on staff in 2015. I'm the international correspondent. I cover the UN among other things. But in our pandemic time, I've also been branching out and covering more here in New York City and doing some environmental coverage in the Hudson River Valley.
Great. Michelle.
I'm Sister Michelle Morick. I'm an Ursuline sister of Mount St. Joseph, and I work with the sisters in developing their stories that we call columns that I'll talk about a little bit later on.
Soli?
I'm Soli Salgado. I'm a staff writer for GSR, and I cover some US stuff, but mainly Latin America, Central America, South America. That's my baby. So
Straightforward. Okay, Dan.
I am Dan Stockman. I'm the national correspondent for Global Sisters Report, which I've been almost from the very beginning of Global Sisters, starting back in 2014. As the national correspondent, basically almost anything involving sisters in the U.S. Is fair game for me. So don't be afraid to pitch anything to me, because I kind of do it all.
All right. Shannon.
Hi, I'm Shannon Evans. I do social media. I'm the social media editor at GSR. And right now we're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and I'm kind of looking to move into some new mediums in the future, but I'm pretty new. I've only been here a few months. So.
All right. And then Lori.
Everybody, I'm Lori Krupp, and I work with the Witness and Grace events, which we started in the pandemic. They're online events that folks can attend and see some of the stories in a living format.
All right. Great, thanks. So I wanted to move into a little bit more about, again, why and how to pitch stories to us. One key reason that we're doing this workshop, as I mentioned, is that we wanted to hear more from women religious congregations, more ideas, more suggestions. We have a need for sisters to profile for Q&As. We usually look for sisters in active ministries, but there are sometimes opportunities to get sisters who are retired and in other forms of congregations that we may be able to look at. We're looking at feature stories as well. Again, there may be something that your congregation is doing or that you've heard through your colleagues that may make a trend story for us that we haven't really covered yet. So again, we'd appreciate hearing about that. And we understand that you have a lot of responsibilities, internal communications, and a lot of things that you do with development and that type of thing. But we wanted, again, to just emphasize that elevating your story or elevating story pitching to a higher priority can benefit your congregation. It results in recognition in the larger community among your supporters and your donors. And that Global Sisters Report is a really good way to start building those media relationships. As I noted, many of our stories are picked up by Catholic News Service, other used in diocesan publications. So it gives an outside voice and perspective. I'm going to assume that you know the basics about how to pitch, the 5 W's and the how, essentially. But to make sure you include key information when you're contacting us. And in terms of the mechanics of things, generally, email is still best. Again, following up with a phone call, if it's time sensitive, is really appreciated. Many of us are working from home now, but again, you can reach us. Our emails are listed on the website. And my phone number is available through the main NCR number. That's 816-968-2285. And again, that's, I think, listed on the website, and I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. One of the major things was asked to talk about errors in pitching, and really, frankly, one of the biggest is timing. And this just came up this week again when we were notified about an event literally 2 days before. And that is just not enough time for us. We need to be able to get a peg or a timing and plan for coverage. It can fit into something we're already working on. It could work into Monday starter again. So in your perspective, getting something in community news for an event within at least 2 weeks, preferably more, a month or so would be great, because it allows it to have more opportunities out there. Again, I can flag it to Shannon to list on social media on occasion, to list it in our Monday starter, and to give it some consideration for coverage if it's something that we think we can or need to, can do. So the other thing we always look for, again, if you know that you have something that's pegged to say National Vocations Week, get to us early. It might be part of a larger story that we're working on. We don't often do anniversary stories per se, but again, we'll sometimes use it as a peg to look for a related story or something, take a closer look at a ministry and program. So as Dan said, try us. Again, just shoot us the email and send it to us, and we'll figure it out from there. One of the other things that was mentioned is how to prepare sisters and others for interviews. My colleagues also opine on this a bit. But, again, I would say that for me as a reporter, context is important. Or we definitely will want details and perspective. If the sister can't remember a particular date or detail during the interview, that's something that perhaps, we want to follow up on. So in a follow-up email or follow-up discussion. One thing that we run into frequently is that we will want to interview people who that the ministry is serving. Sometimes we understand that in the case of, say, survivors of human trafficking or refugees or migrants, those recovering from addiction, in other ministries that might be kind of sensitive, that identifying or talking to a person, it would be difficult, would be sensitive. So our preference is to identify someone, but we can and have often worked in situations where we have to use a name that's not, a real name. We just note to readers that it's a pseudonym. We can take photographs and not show someone's face. So there's a number of ways that we can protect and honor the obligation that you feel toward the recipients of the ministry to protect their identities. So we do have to talk to them, though. One of the things that is really helpful is to at least make them available for an interview with the ground rules firmly and clearly in place. It's much preferable. We can't really just take a statement from them through you, or even just from the sisters. Talking to them firsthand really is a basic for us. So I think those are most of the main key points that I wanted to cover in terms of some of the things that you need to know and how to pitch stories to us. And again, then in what you might want to do to avoid some of the pitfalls. So I think we're going to be turning to our colleagues in a bit about other points. So I'm going to turn to, I think it was Dan was talking to about basically your experience, since you've been with GSR really the longest as a reporter, other than Chris. I mean, Chris also has been with us quite a long time. What you have found in terms of interviewing sisters. I'm going to close this now and how it's changed. So Dan, go ahead.
One thing I would say is, remember the Gospel of Luke says, not only would you not hide your light under a bushel, but you would actually put it on a stand so that you can share the light with the whole world. And I know we love them dearly, but we know sisters don't want to talk about themselves. They don't want to be seen as anything other than humble, which we completely understand. So what we have found helps immensely, and I think it will help you also if you have a sister or sisters that are reluctant. To explain, it's really not about the sisters. It's about the ministry. It's about the work. It's about the people being helped. It's about how the Spirit is working through the ministry, and that goes a long way in getting that light from out from under the bushel. So I think that's the key thing is when Conrad Hilton put in his will that he wanted money to go to the sisters, which funds things like Global Sisters Report. His idea was that if people know about the work the sisters are doing, that will help vocations. People see the work, they will be drawn to participate themselves. Maybe that's just through donations, maybe it's through an associate program, or maybe it's an actual vocation. But whatever it is, that light needs to be out there and not under a bushel. So I would also say the best stories that I've had have never come from a press release. So if you're worried about, what needs to be in a press release, how do I frame it? How do I, I would say, what, just shoot me an email and say, hey, there's this sister I know that's doing this, or, I don't know how it would work, but I think she would be a great story. My very best stories, that's almost always how they start. Someone saying, hey, I know this sister. It's not a formal press release. It's, we can worry about the 5 W's and details and stuff later, but and a lot of times too, it's people sending an email or calling and saying things like, I don't know if this is a story, but, and that's fine too. It doesn't, it doesn't cost you anything to shoot me an email. no one's out anything if it doesn't work out. So let us know. We know quite a bit, but we don't know unless you tell us.
Good points. Good points. And again, on the press releases, we definitely want them for the community news and other things. But again, it actually
for events and
Right.
time sensitive
Those are
things.
useful.
Absolutely.
Chris and Sully, anything to add on that your experience interviewing sisters? Doreen, I'm going to throw it open to my colleagues.
I mean, just a few things, just to underline what my dear colleagues have been saying. What I want to underline what Gail said about timing. That's very important, and it's particularly with Monday starter. I don't want to get into the ins and outs of our deadline schedule, but because that runs on Mondays, and that's a good forum for shorter items. That's why we put this together. Timing is important, and so if we can have, I think, at least a week, but I'm thinking maybe 10 days, 2 weeks ahead of time is always very, very helpful. Then to underline what Dan was saying, I mean, please just approach us, inundate us with press releases. I think we welcome it. His point about the humbleness of sisters, we all know that. Something you could convey to them perhaps is this is a staff who we know the dynamics with sisters, and I think we're a very careful group of journalists, and we're very respectful of sisters and their ways of doing things. So I would when you talk to sisters about approaching us, please underline that element, I think.
From the audience, Sully?
Yeah, I think mainly what how I like to wrap my interviews is usually the big two questions of who else do you think I should talk to? It really makes me nervous that I'm writing an article and about this subject, and there's this obvious person that sisters feel is missing from the article. So I usually, if they can have kind of be prepared to think on that, or maybe to brainstorm with their comms person afterward to send me contacts. There's usually a follow-up email that I have with sisters, and that's for photos is the other question. And they tend to be like, oh, let me talk to our comms person. So I think having photos ready, or at least being prepared to be asked for photos. And even if they don't have any, a headshot can go a long way, at least with just kind of sticking it into the article and sort of introducing this sister a little better to our readers. So I think photos, and then contacts or suggestions for more people to talk to are usually the way that I close out interviews, and that involve the comms person. So I think there's some preparation there that could always be handy on both ends. But yeah, let me think. And then something I know that that is requested sometimes, if they can get questions in advance. I know reporters tend to prefer not to do that. One of the reasons I don't like to do that also is because sometimes in the conversation, I come up with questions on the spot, and I don't want them to think that I am, that I snuck one in, or that they weren't prepared for that one. So I like to give them instead a few themes that I will be addressing, some more like broader questions for them to sit on if they do want to prepare for the interview. And I do find that that is probably the best way to go about it, because they've given some time to kind of ruminate on the big points that they want to bring up, but there's still room for them to surprise themselves with what they say on the spot. So yeah, I think in terms of like, if they want to prepare for an interview, if they want to have time, I think that's what's important, is to just kind of know the direction, but not necessarily feel like they need to study up or have everything like so concise, unless we only have 10 minutes to talk, then sure, you can have my 2 questions in advance, but that's usually not the case. So yeah, I think that those are usually the big points for me with interviewing.
Doreen, anything you wanted to add?
I think everybody has said everything that needs to be said, but for me, what works for me, especially when you're reporting about the Catholic sisters, is you have to know that there are no new story ideas. First thing, as a journalist, you have to embrace that there is nothing new that hasn't been reported. But you have to also know that each and every person has a story to tell. You may meet people, but not necessarily because they can make news, but deep down, they always have a story to tell. So what I do is I try to kind of dig deeper in what does this person has to tell me. So what I do as I prepare myself, do my research, I get in touch with the sister. Like after introducing yourself, I go straight to the point. Like, sister, I know you are a person, I know you minister, I know you may not have much, but I know deep down you have a story to tell. That is always my beginning point. Then from there, I jot down my ideas, I jot down my questions that I expect. Then I can explain a bit of what I want to the sister. So if they are ready, we give it a go ahead. We kind of have a conversation, because I already have an idea that I have in my head. I already have a focus, and I already understand that I don't just want to make things like maybe assume that the less obvious this is, maybe look for, maybe this is the obvious thing that I need to look for, but always as a journalist focus on maybe, remember that, have the notion that the loser often makes the better story than the winner. So try to look for that as you pitch your ideas as a journalist. And from there, you are good to go. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the thoughts. I appreciate the thoughts. One note about photos, as mentioned, we do take photos when we can, but oftentimes, especially in these times of COVID, we've had to rely on photos from the sisters and from the congregation. Again, photos that you have that you take internally about sisters actually doing the ministries rather than static stand-up shots are always welcomed. Make sure you've got the right credits and permissions to grant us to be able to use them. I'm going to turn first to Sister Michelle to talk a little bit about columnists, and then turn to my colleagues Meg and Shannon about social media. So Sister Michelle talked about our wonderful range of columnists, which really are quite varied.
All right. I have the best job in the world. I don't care what Gail said. I get to help the sisters tell their own stories. And I know they're very humble and all that, but they love to see their stories in print, and their communities love to see the stories in print. When I write a story, my community makes copies of it and hangs it on all the elevators at the mother house. And I know that other sisters have that experience too. Well, a column is personal reflection written by a sister or an associate or oblate or agrégé. If you have associates or oblates or so forth, they can also write columns for us. They're short, they're about 800 to 1200 words, and they're personal reflections about anything. Of course, we love to get amazing stories about sisters in war zones in Myanmar and Ethiopia, but sometimes our best stories are, I had a wonderful one on earthworms and dogs and sisters giving a kidney to their sister and all kinds of personal experiences. So we love from hearing from new countries, and we love to hear stories about the border and other current events and how sisters fit in. But sometimes those make better articles that the professional staff journalists will write, or Q&As. But columnists are personal reflections by sisters. And some of the best ones I have been written by retired sisters, because they can write about spirituality. They can write special columns for Easter and Lent and Advent, and we love getting those. The challenges I have with sisters writing their own articles are usually things like sourcing. You know, they will use a quote or give a figure that they don't give adequate sourcing for. And of course, the copy editors catch me and they won't let me use it. So you might just keep that in the back of your mind if you're helping them write their stories. Some want to use Wikipedia as a source, and that is a no-no. Just think, if you were a high school English teacher, what you would let your students use as sources. I have a few sisters that love to just string holy quotes together, you know, from the Bible or from books, or I want this to be the sister's personal reflection. And so if they send me one like the holy quotes strung together, we will work with them until we get their personal stuff in there. So whatever they want to send, I would let them, but there might be ways that you could help them if they ask you.
Okay. Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate that. All right, Shannon, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I just, if I may ask just a follow-up question. We've talked a little bit about pitching and timing for those columns. Is there an ideal timing or a way to pitch those to you?
Oh, to me?
Yes.
Well, I'm the same. If they want to write something for the World Day of Traffic Persons, and they send it to me 2 days before that day, we can't turn it around. But if there's a specific peg that they want to approach, I should get it 2 weeks ahead of that. Sometimes we can make exceptions, but or even if they send me something that is out of date, we can work with it. You know, we can put it in the past tense. And since these are personal reflections, it's never too late to personally reflect about something.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Meg and Shannon. Stories
Hi.
told with water on.
I'm Meg Nestor, and I am the marketing manager for Global Sisters Report. And I work on our emails and sometimes like personal outreach. I've probably emailed some of you about certain stories that are up if it relates to your congregation, or if someone from your congregation is mentioned. But we have a great email list. We have, as Gail said, I think 33,000 subscribers, and they're really engaged. Our only problem that we sometimes get, like feedback wise, is that sisters feel like they have to read everything in our emails or they feel bad. So we always try to make it clear, like, this is just a sampling. It's not, someone is, you know, there's no offense taken if you have to delete our emails, especially when there's those mass emails. So that's kind of an interesting problem. So I never want to send too many emails because I know they really do read it and take it seriously, and which is a great problem to have. But then typically for stories, I'll try to reach out to the congregation, like I mentioned, or organizations that might find it interesting to get our name out to a wider group. Like if we have a story on the environment, I'll try to look for environment related religious organizations or just general environmental organizations and send that to them. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but worth a shot to get our name out there. And then Shannon, she handles all of our social media. So I'll pass it over to her.
Hi, yeah. So as I said before, we're active on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And there is some overlap of followers on each, but we kind of have a different style of engagement with each platform that serves a lot of different audiences really well. Facebook is by far our biggest. We have 17,000 plus followers there, almost 2,000 on Instagram and almost 5,000 on Twitter. So definitely a strong presence, and it's growing daily. We're getting new followers all the time. And the post that I really love my part of the job because I get like immediate feedback and get to see what seems to be hitting people the most. And I should say our followers include women who are themselves sisters, and also just people who are interested in the work, who want to learn more about the ministry, maybe are interested in vocation themselves. So we have a little bit of everything, both lay people and religious. And I noticed that stories absolutely seem to resonate with people. But there's also a hunger I'm seeing to hear about how sisters are processing all of the changes in the world and in religious life, and kind of an interest in things like racial reckoning within the church, and how sisters are grappling with those kinds of issues, environmental issues, certainly, and even sorry, the like the future of religious life, and the questions about what that's going to look like, and how that might change in the next generation. And so there's all sorts of it doesn't have to be like a headline story, but there are things just going on in the inner life of the religious community that are really interesting to people, and that even young people, especially on Instagram, there's a lot of interest in just what it's like. I think there's really a void of young people not getting to hear a lot about religious life and about what it's like to be a sister. So I've seen a lot of enthusiasm for that.
Thanks so much, Shannon. Thanks so much, Meg. Appreciate it. I should also mention that there's another more select, I guess, or smaller but important part of our social media outreach, and that's a WhatsApp group for Africa that Doreen facilitates. And so this is a WhatsApp group with, what's it, 230 some odd members, or maybe 250 members, Doreen, roughly, that you facilitate?
It's already full. We have 257 members.
Right.
Yes.
So, again, so it is full, and we have to figure out whether we're going to, again, figure out how to go through the list or add another channel, or how we're going to handle that. But through that channel, Doreen flags stories that are pertaining to Africa. Sometimes we'll entertain a question that has sometimes led to story ideas, out of that WhatsApp group. So that's another way that we reach out to sisters. So that's basically one of the things I wanted to cover about, again, who we are, how to approach us, what we look for as journalists, and so again, and how we try to spread the word, which is our mission, to give voice to Catholic sisters around the world, and to write about them, cover and report on them, and give voice to sisters around the world. That's our mission. So open it up for questions if anyone has any.
Well, you've actually been answering a lot of I've got all these prepared questions in case no one said anything at this time. So, but you've been answering them along the way. So I'm trying to come up with new questions as we go. And, I want to speak a little bit from my own personal experience, and this may relate to a lot of our participants. I think for me, one of the challenges about just simply pitching a story is just bandwidth and priorities. And what would you say to your overwhelmed communicators out there about how we can make those connections between congregations and Global Sisters Report?
Well, we do understand they are overwhelmed. I mean, one of the things that we don't take it personally that you don't contact us, because I know you have a lot going on with internal communications and donor communications. But again, one of the things I'd point out is that if we do a story, a Q&A with one of your sisters, or do a story in which your congregation appears, then that is something you can certainly use, and many of the congregations do. So we can sometimes do some of your work for you in that regard. So think about it in that way. It's a win for us in terms of being able to communicate. Again, the CWR has been great in terms of getting word out when we're working on a feature story or a series, and we need examples and anecdotes. You've been really cooperative with that, which we very much appreciate, in terms of helping us make sure that we get as many examples as we can. I know that Chris is working on a story now about Afghan refugees, for instance, in which I know he's gotten a number of leads from CWR members, and we've done this in the past. So again, think of us as we have the same interest in a lot of ways, which is to tell the story of women religious.
Right. We are allies.
Right. A lot of ways, yeah.
There are a couple of questions in the Q&A section, and two of them are really similar. What stories are you looking for right now? And do you have like dream stories that you're looking for?
Stories we're looking for right now. We have been finishing up a series about just transition. So that's something we're probably going to want to come back to, because we were able only to do a short treatment on that. Some of you know that basically a just transition is looking at ways to transition from a fossil fuel-based economy to more sustainable. And that's something we've already done a fair amount of reporting on. We may continue it into 2022 because we had to, because of COVID and the number of other obligations we had, is to, to start that series a little bit later than we might have. So in terms of other stories, again, we mentioned that Chris has got an Afghan refugee piece he's worked on. We've got a couple of pieces and we're brainstorming for our quarterly reports that, again, before every quarter starts, we sit down with editors and work with the reporters on ideas that they have coming up. The border is a continuing topic for us. So sisters who are, I see slowly nodding, and we're always looking for new ways to cover it. So you see, sisters who are volunteering at the border, working at different ministries there. That's always a topic of interest, something that's topical. So that's something that's dream stories. Gosh, we've had so many. There's been a wonderful plethora of really, really wonderful stories about sisters. But in terms of dream stories, I think that they're ones that fulfill our mission to get across the stories about Catholic sisters that have good anecdotes about people who are being helped by a ministry, that tell the story deeper, the story behind the stories. I think that's what I look for as an editor, than for reporters who are able to, as Doreen notes, and others have too. Everyone has a story to tell. Even the people that we're interviewing who are being assisted by a ministry have a story to tell. And sometimes those stories within the story can be quite memorable as anecdotes or examples in a piece. So that's what we look for, is something that is deeper, that resonates with people, that they remember. So
I can say as far as stories that we're looking for right now, I did a big piece on racial reckoning over the summer, but next I want to do a piece on practical steps that sisters are taking to address this. So like that first story mentioned the Sisters of Charity of Nazareth and the work that they've done because they owned slaves before the Civil War. But now they're taking direct practical steps to address things. So like they've always supported affordable housing, but now they're deliberately and specifically supporting affordable housing for African Americans and home ownership programs for African Americans. They've always had scholarships at their schools and universities, but now they're adding them specifically for African Americans as both kind of reparations, but also just as a direct response to, we have inequities in our world and we need to address them. So anything like that, I would love to hear about. Just again, shoot me an email. Also working on a story about nursing homes and how they were affected by the pandemic. So I know lots of sisters congregations have nursing homes, and if you could let me know how they were affected by coronavirus, I would love to hear that as well.
There's
go ahead.
There are a few questions in the Q&A. In fact, Molly, we might need to make you a panelist. You've got lots of questions here. And specifically, she's asking one of Dan, if you've written anything about sisters contending with their work at boarding schools.
I've not written it yet, but I am working on it. So Molly, if you know something, please let me know.
Yeah, that's one of our big topics for 2022.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just a little addendum to what Dan and Gail were saying. We haven't, as far as I know, we haven't decided what a focus will be on in terms of a possible series for next year. I think we would welcome suggestions about sort of big themes that we could possibly tackle.
Yeah. In the past, we've done themes about migration. We've done homelessness. Again, the Just Transition series. We've done series on mining. We do smaller series on occasion. Dan won a national award for a series about emerging forms of religious life. I saw a question, Molly, too, you had about international days on the calendar. For the international days about trafficking, February 8th. I mean, there's like 3 different days about human trafficking that are on the calendar. We can't always do all of them, but we try. So there's one in January that the USCCB notes. February 8th is the one we pay a lot of attention to for the feast day of Sister Bikita. So again, ministries and sisters that are active in anti-human trafficking issues, that's something we're always looking for. And so those are the types of things we'll be looking for. And in terms of reflections that we look for right now for the new year, again, in terms of, again, I'll turn to Michelle, but we look for, again, as she mentioned, if we're writing about Advent, it's almost too late, but we have a few slots left for Advent, Christmas, that type of thing. Again, if you're going to get something in soon about liturgical seasons, it's got to be done in advance, right, Michelle?
Yes, I have a ton of them for Advent right now, but it's not too early to start thinking about Lent and Easter and so forth. Or sometimes they choose specific saints they want to write about, especially Mary Magdalene gets more than her share of sisters' writings. And while I'm talking to you, if you have young sisters who are interested in writing, we have a young sisters spot called Horizons. Every Friday, a young sister writes a column for that. And we have a specific group of columnists, but I'm always glad to find another young sister who wants to write, and we'll use her as a guest and eventually as a member of that elite writing group.
Okay. Hopefully our guests are following through the chat. There's a number of resources that Brian's dropping in there, a lot of links, and repeating some of the questions that are being asked on the Q&A. One of the questions that Dusty asks is, with the Laudato Si Action Platform in full swing and taking up lots of congregational energy over the next 7 years, how do you hope to keep stories about that fresh, and how can we help?
That is a great question, and we would appreciate your help in this. One of the things that we've been, even long before the Laudato Si Action Platform, we have been paying attention to Sowing Hope for the Planet, which was the UISG effort to get a sharing of what congregations are doing to live out Laudato Si. Where that, of course, was ratcheted up with the Laudato Si Action Platform. We, in our related publication, Earthbeat, will often pay attention to this. And, again, we're looking at how we can freshen this up. If there are maybe a initiative by congregations that will highlight, that'll be a good example for others. That's something we're looking at. I'd be interested in hearing what type of energy it's taking from your congregation and what you're contributing. We've made some comments and some notes in Monday Starter of congregations that are contributing to the Laudato Si Action Platform. We've done a short story about the Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur, who, basically they wanted to honor Sister Dorothy Stang, with their efforts. So we did a short piece on that. Actually, Barbara Fraser, editor Earthbeat, did that, and we picked it up. So we're definitely, that's, again, over the next 7 years, that's going to be one of our challenges. As I always said to people, it's, and I think Doreen had mentioned that we've done, in the 7 years we've been in existence, so many stories and so many topics. So finding fresher angles can both be a challenge, but it's also met because of the people involved. As Doreen mentioned, each story told gives us a new spin and a new perspective and insights. So it's, again, it behooves us as journalists and you as communicators to help us find those new and fresh angles. So thank you for thinking about that. And we'll definitely be turning back to you in 2022 as we look forward to how we approach the Laudato Si Action Platform and how we keep that fresh.
Right. Again, if you're following the chat, there was a question to follow up a mention from Sister Michelle. But what is a young sister? You're defining young sister, and the consensus seems to be under the age of 50. All right.
Yeah. Right.
Let's see, any other questions out there? I'm just trying to field through the chat and the Q&A. I think we may have caught the ones that have come up so far. There was a question that, going way back to our introductions, for Shannon, you had referenced the social media platforms that you're on. already, but you're looking at some others. What are you looking at?
We would love to do TikTok, but that's going to be kind of a work in progress, is figuring out how to do that, because I'm remote. So, how to do that with the sisters, and
Right.
yeah, it's going to be probably a longer endeavor, but yeah, that's what I have my eye on particularly.
Okay, and then can we submit content to you as well? As far as like, is there such a thing as a social media pitch, or do you just kind of are you looking at that on your own? Hey, here's a great photo that we had,
You can always tag us, and if it's something that makes sense for me to reshare, then I can do that, but not formal pitches.
All right. Again, looking for any other questions from our audience. I know you had addressed, one of my main questions you actually answered, and that is, how do you get people who are maybe served by a ministry, whether it's a refugee or maybe someone in an addiction setting or something of that nature, how do you work out an interview with them and prepare them for an interview? But I think you addressed that. So I don't know if you have any other tips to add to that, but.
Well, we understand that it can be sensitive, and the sister can assure them that we can, again, protect their identity, but that it helps the sisters, in telling their story about the ministry, that to get real examples. And, generally we've had good reaction and good participation, and even in situations where we weren't able to identify the participants or the people receiving the assistance in the ministry. So it's basically a certain gentleness in the questions too. I mean, I think most our reporters, as mentioned, we've been doing this a long time. And so one of the things we did a few years ago as an internal workshop was about victims and how we do not want to re-traumatize victims. So there's that in approaching them. So that's one of the things we try to frame a question as from this point forward, how are you making your life? We try not to have to retell the actual traumatization or event that may have occurred that that landed them in a particular ministry or situation. So again, it's one of those things that we are sensitive to, about not wanting to re-traumatize people. Is that helpful, Rob? I mean, is that one of the things
It is. Thank you.
But again, we do recognize it's sensitive.
I would also say, we're also always happy to talk off the record about a story or about an interview and how it might go, or, how the story might be framed, or, I mean, there are sometimes when we're going to have to cover bad news and there's just no way around it. But I mean, as comms people, please understand, we know there are times you're not going to be able to comment, right? And we get that. Sometimes the attorneys tell you are not allowed to do it, right? That doesn't hurt our feelings if you, right? But I would much rather, have you on the phone saying, look, I talked to the sisters and we can't comment, than to just not get a response at all. So, and again, I'm more than happy to talk about, what the story will be and that sort of thing. So don't be afraid to reach out on that level as well.
I'll underscore that point of Dan's about at least communicating with us on an off-the-record basis. I personally spent weeks trying to get a response from a congregation on a very sensitive story, and we bent over backwards. We sent letters, we sent emails, we offered to reopen the piece. I never got a response. And heard later that the sisters didn't want to comment, which we would have understood. But it would have been helpful to have gotten that at the outset, so that we didn't have to spend weeks and weeks and weeks, trying to do our best to be fair and to get their side of the story. So I'll underscore that.
Chris was going to add something.
Yeah, well, just to connect one issue that we haven't talked about, and I think all my colleagues have encountered this at various times, and it gets into this question of sensitive stories. sensitive questions. Many times actually, I've been asked, can I see from a sister I've interviewed, can I see the story before it appears? And I see my colleagues shaking their heads. Yes. What I always tell them, and I think probably what my colleagues say, is that's basically a no-no in journalism. I have no trouble going over quotes with people over the phone to make sure that they're quoted accurately. I have no trouble with that, and I actually think it makes for a better story. But I do think we are allies and collaborators, really. And that's a wonderful thing. But there is a wall there that we can't, show stories as they will appear before they appear.
Yeah, I'm happy to share quotes as well. Again, we want to be accurate. We want to get it right. That thing of sharing quotes beforehand is not necessarily a chance for the sister to, change all her answers or, clean up all her grammar or make it sound nicer, but it's for accuracy. But yeah, I think everyone here is happy to share the quotes because again, we want it to be right.
Right. I had to double check things, details of, facts, factual points. You may find an email from a reporter with a list of points that they want to just double check in terms of numbers or dates, those types of things usually often need to be double checked and rechecked. Firsts are always an issue. Whenever you say a sister is a first something, that's always, in any reporter, that's something that's very, can be fraught with issues. So we're careful about whether something is a real first in framing it. So something else.
Well, thank all of you. We're really close to the top of the hour. I've been looking for new questions and comments, but haven't seen any. So I think we're close to wrapping up here. And really, I just want to thank all of you for joining us. I mean, what a fantastic giant panel we have. And thank you for joining us, Gail, and everyone else at GSR. Thank you so much. And I think just an editorial comment about, our reflex is to protect the institution. And of course, when you get something that's going to be out on media, and that's always a concern, and people get kind of defensive about that. But I think that you've really shown that we are collaborators and allies, and this is about as safe a space as we can get to put stories out into the media. So I really thank you for sharing all this with us today, and appreciate your time. And I'm just going to move on into the wrap-up content, and just remind people that we'll have a little survey that follows this, as we often do. And the recording of this session will also be available on the CWR website. We have a couple more post-conference content coming up this week, Thursday, December 2nd. We have Amplifying Justice with Kristen Whitney Daniels and Maria Elena Perales. And then next week on December 7th, we will speak with Sister Charlene Hendricks and Carol Schuck-Scheiber from NRVC. And we also have our CWR award recipients for this year, a panel with them next Wednesday, December 8th. Also remember the new member initiative. So talk to your colleagues about this amazing opportunity to join CWR and get connected with the CWR Discord app. There's always good conversation and connection happening there. So until next time, which is really just a couple days from now, thanks for joining us, and have a fantastic Giving Tuesday. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all. Much appreciated. Bye.